Our family relocated to Kansas City and we made these 6 mistakes. If we had to do it over again, this is what we would do differently. Stick around until the end and I will share with you the one thing that we did do correctly in relocating to Kansas City. The first mistake that we made was not visiting our house before we closed on it. And you might be saying, that's crazy to buy a house before you step foot in it. And guess what? You are correct. We bought our house completely sight unseen, what they call it in the realtor world. I had never stepped foot inside that house before I even bought it. The first time we walked into that house, we had already signed all the papers, put down our down payment, signed all the loan documents, and we were locked into a 30-year mortgage on that house without ever stepping foot into the property. Looking back at that, that was a silly and stupid decision. But guess what? We were just super happy to own a house. We did not think of all the things that could go wrong potentially in the house. And you know what? It never even crossed our minds that we wouldn't like the house. And the reason that this was such a big mistake was honestly, while we still own the house right now, it's a rental property for us. While we still own the house right now, we actually don't like the house that much. And we probably would have never picked it if we would have visited and gone inside it. No big deal. It is a great asset for us. And during the time that we lived there, we really enjoyed our time there. But the house itself was kind of configured weird. There were 2 separate living areas on the opposite sides of the house. And so we spent all our time in one living area and basically neglected the other living area. So there was like 500 or 700 square feet, depending on how big that living area was, that was completely just neglected, that we never went in there. In the house right now, we have one large living area where our family congregates, and we like that way better than having a lot of square footage that we don't even use and don't even think about using. So one of the things that we would do differently is we would have come to Kansas City to look at houses in person. That is something that you need to do if you're considering moving here to Kansas City, because you simply don't know what the house will look like in person. I'm going to share with you an industry secret. All the real estate photographers, what they're super good at is making the house look completely different than what it is on the inside. When you step in, they have fisheye lenses. They have all of these things that can make the house look just completely, entirely different. The yard on our last house, while it is pretty big, in the photos, it looked like we were living on acreage because they could use that fisheye lens and stretch out that field of view and just show you everything. And so we thought we were going to have like 100 yards of a backyard, and it really was about half of that. Still pretty big of a backyard, still pretty good size for our dog and for our kids to run, but nothing like the photos. So you need to be here in person when you're picking a house, especially if you're going to buy when you relocate. It's not so important if you're going to rent because you're probably going to be in that rental for a year, and then if you don't like it, you can move into another rental for another year. Yes, it's a hassle, but if you're going to buy a house and you're going to sign your name to a 30-year mortgage like we did when we moved here, you're going to want to know that you enjoy that house. Now, speaking of looking at houses, this week I'm going to be taking 3 clients around Kansas City to look for their home in their relocation, and they called me right through this YouTube channel. Our phone number is 816-4-MOVE-KC, and we would love to help you navigate this housing market, especially if you're going to buy here in Kansas City. We've helped tons of families relocate here and move, and again, I would consider coming in person, meeting myself or my team, and letting us take you around different parts of the metro that will fit your needs. 816-4-MOVE-KC. Call or text us anytime. We promise we will get back to you promptly. The second mistake that we made was we did not consider the entirety of the Kansas City metro. When we first moved here, we just heard from somebody, I don't even remember who, they said, hey, move to the Missouri side, don't even consider the Kansas side. And that's exactly what we did. We only looked at houses on the Missouri side, eventually bought one. Like I said, never stepped into it before until we closed. Bought one on the Missouri side in a city called Gladstone, lived there, loved it there, but again, we never even considered that there's a whole half of Kansas City in the Kansas City metro that we did not consider, and that was a mistake. Now, since then, I've become a realtor. I know these other areas that we did not consider well, and I would say that we made a huge mistake not considering areas like Prairie Village, Overland Park, the rest of Johnson County. There were a lot of attractive areas that we didn't even have on our map. Even the area that we live right now in Midtown, we did not even think that this was an area that was viable for us, because based on the advice that we got from people was to stay north of the river and not even consider anything south of the river. And that was a big mistake too, because we love the area where we live right now, and we would have loved to move here initially. We are so much closer to all of the things that we really enjoy doing here in Kansas City, where we live right now. And when we moved in Gladstone, it was pretty much a haul to get down here, downtown, down to Midtown, all these cool things to do down here, because we were 25 minutes out sometimes, depending on traffic. Now, speaking of traffic and commuting, that leads me to the third thing that we did completely wrong in moving here to Kansas City, and that was not considering the commute time. The reason that we moved out here initially was for me to do my PhD, and my wife was going to be working the entirety of the time that I was going to school. And so she worked at a hospital called Research Medical Center. And if you're at a computer, go ahead and do this right now. Go to Google Maps, type in Research Medical Center, and then map it to Gladstone, and you'll see that they are on different ends of the Kansas City Metro. Gladstone is up north, Research Medical Center is down south. And that drive, while it being 20 to 25 minutes normally, can get to be a pretty long drive, especially during rush hour. We did not consider that 20 to 25 minutes here in the Kansas City Metro is actually considered a pretty long drive that's going all the way, almost all the way across the metro. We had come from Los Angeles, and so we were used to sitting in 20 to 25 to 30 minutes to 45 minutes of traffic just to go 5 to 6 to 7 miles because of gridlock traffic. When you're driving 20 to 25 minutes in Kansas City, you are going a considerable distance because we don't have that much traffic here. When they do get gunked up, that drive can become considerably longer, 40 to 45 minutes. And the reason that that was a big deal for us was because we came here with only one car. Our 2000 Subaru Outback was the only car that we brought to Kansas City from California, and we were trying to get by on one car. And that was a really difficult thing. So when my wife had to work, I would have to load up my 1-year-old child at the time, drive her down to work, drop her off, come all the way back up, do my things around the house because I was kind of single dadding it while I was doing my student stuff. And then I would have to load my son back up again. And by this time, it was past his bedtime or it was really late, drive all the way down the 25 minutes down to Research Medical Center, pick up my wife, drive her all the way back. And we did that for almost a year until we got another car. We decided that this was not sustainable. So if you're moving here from work, then I would say one of the things that you do want to value is you don't want to live all the way across the metro. I had a client once who decided to live all the way up in Excelsior Springs. And then she had a daughter who went to school in Olathe. Now that is completely opposite parts of the metro. And that is a completely ridiculous drive. And guess what? She regretted it within a month. She called me and said, Jalen, I have to have you sell my house because I absolutely cannot make this drive anymore. This is not doable. We need to move somewhere near to Olathe, and that's exactly what she did. But she went through some difficult times, some stress and anxiety, listing a house just months right after it was sold. That is never a good situation for you. So if you're going to come and you're going to work in an area, I would suggest live 15, at most 20 minutes away from that area. But if you do choose to even live 20 minutes away from the area where you work, then come here, come and visit, go drive around, go drive from Gladstone to Research Medical Center, for example, and see, is this a drive that I would want to make multiple times a day? Because you may find that it is completely unsustainable, and you might be surprised at how sprawling and wide the Kansas City Metro truly is. The number 4 mistake that we made was not knowing where to shop. When we moved to Gladstone, we moved within walking distance to a grocery store called Hy-Vee. Now, if you watch the Kansas City Chiefs games, especially during our local broadcast here, Hy-Vee has a huge presence in the Kansas City Chiefs. They sponsor them. They spent a lot of advertisement money to get their name out there. And it's a good grocery store. It's a decent grocery store. You can definitely find everything you want, and the quality is good. Here's the one problem though. It is super expensive compared to where we shop now, and that's Aldi. When I was preparing for this video, I asked my wife one of the things that she regrets in moving here to Kansas City in terms of how we did it, and she said, I wish I would have known where to shop because we would have saved so much money in that first year if we would have gone to Aldi instead of Hy-Vee. And I asked her to estimate how much money would we have saved going to Aldi instead of Hy-Vee. She said Aldi probably cut our grocery costs at least in half, maybe to a third of what we were paying when we were going to Hy-Vee every week. Aldi is one of the best places around Kansas City to get groceries. Now, if you need something that's organic, you may need to go to Sprouts, you may need to go to Whole Foods, those types of places, and those are gonna be more expensive. But even then, you know your dietary needs, you know the food that you need to eat, you know all the dietary restrictions. Hey, you know, if you're like me and my mom has been talking about moving to Kansas City and what it would be like to move to Kansas City, one of the things I tell her is that, look, there are a few good Asian supermarkets here in Overland Park and one in River Market. That's about it, okay? If you move to these other places, you are not going to be close to these Asian supermarkets that you are super used to going to when you lived back to Los Angeles, and they were on, you know, every block, it seemed like. One of the things that you are going to need to know for yourself is what are your needs when you move to Kansas City, and where can you get those needs fulfilled? Where I came from, there were plenty of Trader Joe's around. We have one Trader Joe's in the Kansas City metro. There's rumors that there's going to be another one opening up, but there's one Trader Joe's here in Kansas City. Luckily, it is near to us, but when we lived in Gladstone, that would be a whole haul to get everybody into the car to go to Trader Joe's to pick up some of those, you know, pumpkin cookies that they have during the fall. Now, speaking about getting around the metro, one of the things that we were not prepared for in Kansas City was the first Kansas City winter was absolutely brutal. We were not ready for it at all. Now, the only things that I had, because again, we had come from Southern California, and so the only kind of things that I had were sweatshirts kind of like this. Okay, this is my Charger sweatshirt that I brought over from Southern California. You can see that it's not very thick at all. I mean, if it's like 50 or even 40 degrees, it'll do fine. Normally gets colder than that during these Kansas City winters. It's a very thin layer, so that's not going to help you. And that was basically the only top layers that I had in moving to Kansas City. Now, since then, I've invested in a good winter coat, a good winter parka, but I got it on eBay for cheap because, you know, I like haggling and wheeling and dealing and stuff like that. You're going to need some thicker stuff if you're moving here from a climate that does not get as cold as Kansas City does. One of the things that I never did when I lived in Los Angeles was I never wore beanies. And you know what? I cannot keep track of a beanie to save my life. It seems to be completely impossible for me to buy a beanie one year and then hold it till the next year. And guess what? We still don't have good winter gloves here in Kansas City during the winter. It's on my list of things to order, but you know how you put something in your Amazon shopping cart and you're like, oh, I'll buy that later, and then guess what? This week is going to be like 60 degrees. I don't need gloves, okay? So I don't feel like ordering some wool gloves from Amazon to combat a 60-degree day. But you're going to need some gloves. You're going to need some long underwear. That might be a little bit TMI, but it does get really cold here, especially when it gets into the negatives. You're going to want that extra layer of protection from the cold. If you're not regularly going through a winter that gets as cold as it can in Kansas City, and it can get in the negatives here, then you are going to want to be prepared for your first winter here in Kansas City because it's going to come as a shock to you. Another thing that I never did in Los Angeles was I never iced a driveway. I didn't even know what that entailed. If you don't know what that entails, it means that you go to a Target or you go to a Walmart and you get salt that's specifically made to go on your driveway so that it doesn't freeze over. And you have to do this ahead of time. So you have to look at the forecast and you have to know when it's going to be freezing here in Kansas City and raining and snowing and all of those things. Because if you don't want ice and sleet all over your driveway, then you're going to need to salt your driveway. Before moving here, I had never shoveled snow before. So if you're moving from a warmer climate, you're going to want to look up how to shovel snow. It's not that hard, but you're going to want to get a snow shovel. We did not have a snow shovel when we first moved here, and we had to get one pretty quickly because it's hard to get our cars out through a layer of 3-inch snow. You're going to want to shovel that, get that out of your driveway. And if you haven't done that before, that's something that you are going to need to get used to here in Kansas City. The last thing concerning the winter, and probably the most important, is that if you live in a house that does not have good insulation, your pipes can freeze over the winter and it can cause you a big time repair. We have some friends who live in a really nice apartment in North Kansas City, and their pipes froze over this last cold streak, and they had a ton of stuff ruined, and they had to move out of their apartment. It's a tragic circumstance, but it happens every winter here in Kansas City with the first freeze. You need to know how to protect your pipes. You need to know how to make sure the water is flowing so that it doesn't freeze. You need to know where your pipes are so that you can insulate them. All of these things are going to be foreign to you if you're coming here from a warmer weather climate like a Florida or a Texas or a Louisiana. Some of my recent clients are coming from all three of those states, and they had never experienced anything like that before. So we didn't know how to do those things, and you probably don't either. Another thing I'm going to mention is driving in the snow and ice is going to be pretty treacherous. So if you have a front wheel drive car, if at all possible, an all-wheel drive or a front-wheel drive car, it's going to be so much better for you. I have a friend who drives a Mustang that is rear-wheel drive, and during the summers and springs and falls, it's totally fine. But during the winter, he always says at least once a winter, when the roads get really icy and really slick, he does lose control of his car. Really scary situation. So if you have a sports car that is rear-wheel drive, you might consider trading that in for something that's more safe with a front-wheel drive model or an all-wheel drive model if you're going to move here to Kansas City. Now, the last mistake that we made is a mistake that you are not making because you're watching this video. Remember, stick around to the very end and I will tell you the best thing that we did in moving here to Kansas City. But the last mistake that we did was we did not research the city at all. We did not research Kansas City, and you're not making the same mistake again because you're watching this video. But when we came here, we knew nothing about Kansas City. All we knew was that don't live in Kansas, which was wrong, and live north of the river, which was wrong. Okay, so we didn't do our own research. We just kind of said, look, Kansas City is where I'm going to school. We're going to end up there. Okay, let's just move there. Let's look at houses. Bada bing, bada boom, we're here. We wish that we would have done a lot more research. We came with one kid, soon had another one, and are expecting another one. We love taking our kids out to the different areas of Kansas City. And we knew none of them when we came here. We had to learn them while we were here. And while that worked eventually for us, one of the things that you need to do is you need to know how Kansas City is going to fit your needs. If you have young kids, we are definitely experts at telling you all the things that Kansas City has to offer for young kids because we love taking our kids to multiple areas in Kansas City and just having a ball. There are so many things to do here. If you're a single person, did you know that Kansas City was voted as the worst city to meet somebody and to get married? How they measure that metric, again, I don't know. But that's something that you're going to want to know. If you're older and retired, does Kansas City have all the things that you want to do in your retired years? A lot of my retired clients ask, where are the golf courses? I know all the golf courses around here because as a golfer myself, I love playing golf around Kansas City. And there is a phenomenal golf scene here in Kansas City, but do you know exactly where you're going to play? Do you know what club you're going to join? Do you know where you're going to go fishing? All of these things Kansas City has to offer, but you have to do the research before time to make sure that you can move to an area that will accommodate everything that you want to do when you move here to Kansas City. Thank you for sticking around until the end of the video. The one thing that we did in moving here to Kansas City was we had picked a church beforehand, and that was built-in community for us beforehand. I don't know if you're watching this, if you go to church or if you consider yourself a Christian. Our family, we're Christians, so we decided this is the church that we were going to go to. At first, it's called Emmaus Church, and since then we've actually planted out of that church and joined a different church called Trinity Church with the same people, and that was the number one best thing that we could have done for our family in Kansas City. That goes to you. Whether you are Christian, whether you're not, it doesn't matter. You need to be able to find community here in Kansas City because that's what makes Kansas City great is the people here are super friendly and super welcoming and willing to build lifelong friendships and relationships with you if you move here to Kansas City. Now, hey, if you decide to move here to Kansas City and you're looking for a church, we would love to welcome you at our church where we worship. We love it there. We love the people there. It is a super welcoming community, but you need to know where you're going to find community if you move here to Kansas City.